Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Welcome to Sketchbook Sunday. Today we are going to sketch some eyeballs, and I started off with just a mechanical pencil. Any pencil is fine in my sketchbook, and this is again the Fabriano Venice Book Sketchbook that I got in a Smart Art box a couple months ago, and I just absolutely loved it. So I started off by throwing some guidelines down on my paper just so I could line up the eyes a little easier, and I'm only going in and erasing lines that I know I don't need. I like to use a big soft brush to brush away any crumbs. That way it keeps me from getting too confused while I'm sketching. I will leave all this kind of sketchy guidelines in until I've got everything placed, and just kind of erase lines only if I know that they're not absolutely right. Now, a trick that you can do when you are sketching, if you feel like you have a hard time getting things lined up, is to flip your sketchbook upside down, because often if you look at a picture, either it's image in a mirror or you look at it upside down, it's easier for you to tell if something is symmetrical or not. So now I'm just kind of fiddling with the shape and size of the eyes, and I can see right now I've got the eye on the right hand side a little bit too small, or smaller than the right hand side, and I'm just getting that like tear duct area in there, the waterline of the eye, just to kind of help balance it out. And because you can see it on the bottom pretty well, I just want to make sure that's in there. Now, I did have some struggles towards the end of this picture because I didn't have my eyes absolutely symmetrical at the beginning. So if you can fix any errors that you have in your illustration at the get-go, you're going to be so much better off. Keep in mind, though, that there are subtle differences between sides of the face. Very few people have a perfectly symmetrical face, and it's those little nuances that make somebody look like them versus just a generic person. So just kind of keep that in mind. I'm using Turner watercolors today because they have a very delicate coloring to them, pigmentation to them. They're kind of like Winsor & Newton watercolors in that effect. I'm using Naples Yellow and Burnt Sienna to get the primary base tone of the skin tone, and I will be warming up a little bit for the cheeks and the inside of the eyes by adding a little bit of rose red, which is like a quinacridone rose, I believe. That just helps give things a little bit more warmth. If I need to cool things down, I can use a little ultramarine blue in there, and that would kind of give me my triad. So if you have rose red, and you have ultramarine blue, and you have Naples Yellow, and then of course a little burnt sienna for a neutral, that will give you really good skin tones. And honestly, if you increase the burnt sienna and the ultramarine blue, you can get deeper, browner skin tones as well. So it's just a really nice basic portrait coloring, and you just alter how much water you put in. If you want a darker skin tone, you don't use as much. If you were doing this in oils or acrylics, you would use white in place of the water, and you can get a really nice variety of skin tones that way, because you have the blue and the red to cool or warm up your tone depending on what you need. I do go in and switch between brushes when I need to get a finer line. This is a number 2 pointed round from Mimic. This is a Creative Mark Mimic brushes. They're a faux squirrel, and they hold a lot of paint, so I can get a lot of those little eyebrow hairs in without having to reload my brush. I didn't want to zoom out so that my palette was in focus, because I thought it would probably be more useful to see the picture, the sketchbook, a little bit closer. So anytime my hand is off screen for more than a second, I'm mixing up some color. So in the eye, again, it's that same base skin tone color with a little bit of more rose red and burnt sienna added, because you've got that warmer tone in there. And I've made up some gray with ultramarine blue and burnt sienna, and I'm adding that into the whites of the eyes, because you have shadows in there, and your eyeballs aren't really white, just like your teeth aren't white. There are other colors there. The only thing that would be super bright in your eyes would be the reflections, and you're just basically going to paint around those. You can lift them off, especially if you're using watercolor paper. If you're in a sketchbook, you may have difficulty lifting back to the white of the paper without making it pill. I love this sketchbook because it does well with watercolor, but it is not as robust as an actual watercolor paper. So I just want to make sure that I am leaving some of those whites in there, because I may not be able to lift up as much as I'd like. When I color in the pupils, I don't go right in with a super dark color. I will take the colors I've been using, which would be ultramarine blue and burnt sienna, and I'll go in with that. I don't want to go in with a stark black because it's not going to match. You want to mix from what you have available and what you've been using as much as you can to get a realistic look. The eyes that I'm painting are darker around the outsides, and then you see the kind of the spooky fibers going in towards the pupil, so I like to just go right ahead and put my paint in that fashion. I had originally done a light wash in cerulean blue, that way I got that kind of base color, and then I went over with a mix of ultramarine blue and cerulean blue, and then when I wanted anything darker I just added a little more ultramarine and a little bit of burnt umber. For the eyelashes, I am using burnt sienna with a little bit of ultramarine blue. I don't want them too dark. I can always go darker later. Now, when you're putting your eyelashes on, you want to make sure that they have a little bit of curve to them and that they are kind of curving away from the eyeball, so they're not all leaning away from like the nose, for instance. They're kind of like, if you look at the iris, they're all going to be curving away from that. If you have them all going in one direction, then it looks very unnatural. So you just want to really observe what you're painting if you have a reference photo, or look in a mirror and see how the eyelashes really go. Now, the picture I went from, the girl had mascara on, so her lashes I will build up further and make darker because they're more pronounced. To make eyes look realistic, you want to work in layers. So here I'm putting on another layer of ultramarine blue. I used a little bit of cerulean and some hooker's green because generally even blue eyes are not all blue. They have several different variances between blue and green. There may be flecks of gold. You want to make sure that you really capitalize on those differences in order to make the eyes look realistic and lively. To make sure my eyes look like they belong to the same person, I go back and forth between the eyes quite frequently. That keeps you from getting a few steps ahead of yourself and accidentally doing things to one eye that you forget to do to the other. I do my Sketchbook Sunday sketches in about the span of 45 minutes, all in one go, but I recommend that if you're doing something like a portrait or maybe something that you haven't worked with much before, I recommend you take a break before you think you're done, because you can often see things with fresh eyes, just like what I mentioned about flipping your picture over or looking at it in a mirror. You can see things that you may have missed or things that might be off when you do that. I like that addition I put of the hooker's green in the eyes. I felt like it just gave it a little bit more life and glow. And I'm also starting to add shading around the eyes, such as on the eyelid, in the creases of the eyes, on the edge of the nose, just to kind of make the surface look a little bit more two-dimensional. You also have some shading on like the side of the face, where the plane of the face goes back. So it's just really, really observing. And it can be very difficult if you're looking at a professionally taken photograph, like from a magazine, because generally those photographs have been airbrushed and doctored and made to look really smooth and flawless. And you kind of need to see some of those flaws, or not even flaws, but you need to see those different planes of the face in order to make an accurate sketch. I'm going in adding another layer on the eyes because, like I said before, the eyes need those layers to make them look realistic, and this time I'm going in with some ultramarine blue. There's often a point in my sketches where I just feel like I am done. I kind of felt like I've, sketched this. I feel like I don't want to sketch it anymore, and then I'll get a little sloppy. So that's a great time to take a break if you ever feel like you're kind of like, well, I'm kind of tired of working with this. So because I felt like I really wanted to wrap this up, I was getting kind of tired of working on it, I went in with a larger brush and just started to do some larger washes of shadows on the face. Now I had to tip it up to look at it straight on because it can be distorted when I'm sitting at my desk and I'm working flat, because with watercolor you don't work with an easel. So I just wanted to kind of get a look at that and see how it was going, and then I decided that I wanted to lift out those highlights. So I'm using a little scrubber brush. This is a Menta by Royal brush, and I pulled out those higher highlights that I saw, and I decided to grab some colored pencils, my trusty old Prismacolors, and go in with some details. So I'm using a dark brown to enhance the lash line and the eyebrows, and also going into the pupil a little bit with that, and do the same to the other eye, of course. Now with a sharp colored pencil, you can really get that detail on those eyelashes. So if you do want to hold off, you can. I would probably put some in with a watercolor so that it doesn't seem like it's like all your details are done color pencil and all of your washes are done in watercolor. I think it looks nice to just have that as a little bit of an accent. And I'm using a white pencil to just bring out the highlights in the face. It's going to be real subtle because colored pencils are just semi-opaque, so you still see the watercolor underneath, and white on top of that pale skin tone is not going to show up that much, but it does kind of give it a little bit more substance and make the skin feel a little bit more kind of smooth, and gives it that nice kind of translucent quality. And I'm just basically hopping around with different pencils. I did grab an indigo and a black to get the pupils a little bit richer dark, but it doesn't seem like a black hole because I have all those layers of the watercolor underneath, and the colored pencil is translucent, so they all work together. And a super pale gray gives some nice shadows to the eyeball itself, and then I can blend that gray in with a white colored pencil to give it the kind of texture that I want on the paper. I really enjoy doing my Sketchbook Sunday videos. I have no fear when I'm working in the sketchbook. I can layer and play and try out different techniques that I might be hesitant to on a really nice expensive piece of paper. So I hope you give it a try in your sketchbook. That's what they're there for. Nobody has to see it if it comes out terrible. I show pretty much all my sketches because I think it's important to see the good along with the bad, and I think you can learn a lot if you see me make a mistake just as well as you can if you see me do it right the first time. For those of you interested in a real-time version of an eyeball, I do have one on my channel, and I will link to it in the video description so you can check it out if you feel like you want a little bit more guidance on working with eyes and doing the layers. The real-time version I have is all watercolor, and I'll link it below, like I said before, along with a list of the different supplies that I used here in this tutorial. I think that's pretty much it. I mean, I'm just kind of fussing around here with the pencils, and I did notice, like I was looking and I was just feeling like the eyes weren't exactly the same, so to make the eye on the right look a little bit larger, I filled in the waterline at the top, and I think that helped make that eye look a little bit bigger and look a little bit more symmetrical to the one on the left-hand side. So you just give yourself a break, take a look at it, and make any adjustments after it's all done. Thank you so much for watching. Have a happy Easter. Until next time, happy crafting.